Hi, welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, senior film writer for Now Magazine, and welcome to this week's second episode. Aren't you lucky? My guest is Kristine Cofsky, an actor and photographer who co-stars in Mark Sauer's alternate reality satire No Men Beyond This Point, which opens in Toronto tomorrow, Saturday, April 23rd, at the Tiff Bell Lightbox. You may also have seen Kristine in the 2012 feature In No Particular Order, which she also wrote and directed. Kristine picked Rachel Getting Married, Jonathan Demme's 2008 family drama centered on Kim, a troubled young woman who gets a day pass from rehab to attend her sister Rachel's wedding. Even before she gets there, Kim is making bad choices. Once she actually arrives, she's making worse ones. Anne Hathaway is Kim, and Rosemary DeWitt is Rachel, and their remarkable sister act forms the unstable center of a movie that also finds room for Mather Zickel, Bill Irwin, Anna Devere Smith, Tunde Adebimpe, Deborah Winger, and a whole world of emotional complexity. It's a terrific film, and if you haven't seen it, we'll wait. This is Someone Else's Movie.
It was funny when Pam was like, "You want to do this podcast?" and it made me so nervous. First of all, because I don't consider myself a cinephile, or I always feel like the odd one out at all the film festival parties when everyone's like going back and forth about there. But this movie for me was like, I watched it and I was like, this is films for me. Like when I watch a film and it makes me want to make films, that's when I know I've been moved by it, or there's something about it that I came out of this one and I was like, I just want to make movies like that forever. Like, just like that. You know?
It's funny, when so many times when people have picked a film, it's been like a total, oh, wow, really?
Yeah.
And then for an actor to pick this, which is simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying, because, I mean, I watched it and thought, that has got to be, I mean, the first time I saw it in 2008, it was like, that has got to be a simultaneously joyful set and miserable personal space for the actors, because they are performing the collision, right, of profound joy and misery and all the other stuff, and it sounds, just trying to describe it to people sounds awful, because oh well, you know,
it's a cacophony of and there's like, you know, the music is all over the place, and it's like you said, everyone's just like clashing all the time, and
you come out of it with the sense of exhausted happiness, which is what you feel like when you've attended a wedding, generally, like if it's gone well.
Yes, totally.
But so when did you see it? What was your first exposure?
I think I saw it at TIFF, actually. I was trying to remember going back, and I feel like I saw it because I was here for a film when it came out. It was 2008 that it played in TIFF, right? Yeah. And it's funny, when I watch films at TIFF, I always have to rewatch them soon after, because my judgment is so clouded when I'm in a theater with, you know, TIFF audiences are so generous and so amazing, and you go in wanting to just have the best time watching every film, and I think I've only ever actually walked out of one. And I've never walked out of a film, but I was like, and then so I had to go back and rewatch it to make sure that I still had that same reaction, because I had such a visceral same sort of thing, I'm happy and exhausted and I want to cry and I want to lock myself in a room and listen to music, and I want to I just was I had so many things going on when I walked out of the film.
It's rare that, and even Demme doesn't do it every time,
no.
But when you can get that sense of it's a constant catharsis is the only way I can describe it. It's just, it's such a wrenching, busy movie, and I was going over some of the reviews again just because I was really curious. I remember that people either loved it or were weirdly indifferent. There were a few people who thought it was just too busy. And it's that's not something I would say about it. The busyness is sort of kind of necessary to it.
And that's what I loved about it. It was same thing. I watched an interview with Jonathan Demme, and he said, I wanted to make a film that I didn't care what people thought. And you can tell when you're watching the film that they did not care about their audience. They were like, doesn't matter. We're just going to make it the way we want to make it. The speeches go on too long. But it's just like a mess. The whole thing is a mess. And that's why I was like, oh my God, you can make movies like this. And then, it was just such a profound realization for me when I was like, it
is. I mean, it's the kind of movie that is so full of like everything is a showcase. Everyone gets a moment. Every character gets dignity and or the lack thereof, and that's part of it. And it's a story. It's a narrative structure that we've seen dozens of times, if not hundreds
so many
of times.
Yeah.
Somebody tried to do an entire television series out of it with Worst Week, and then that worked in the UK, but not in America. Just this weird sense of possibilities and potential. But you're also dealing with someone who, I think, not to undersell it, hates herself and doesn't want to be there. And it's kind of a corrective in a lot of ways to other wedding movies, because they're either so busy being comical or exaggerated on some level that to be hit with a realistic handheld, you are there kind of performance or you are there kind of experience with someone who isn't even the title character.
Totally.
Like, it's just
totally
like this weird outsider sadness.
Yeah. And I remember watching it too, and I was like, Anne Hathaway was great, but she for me wasn't even the best part of that film. And that was what I found so interesting, is that I was like, here's the pivotal character, that we're following through this journey. And I was most of the time looking around at the other characters to see what they were doing, which is also refreshing in its own right, because most films are like, you cannot take your eyes off this person. This is your main character. This is your protagonist. Do not look away.
Right.
Yeah. Whereas this movie gave you, you're allowed to look around and see what's going on. And the actors were just like, everyone was so perfectly cast. The father was like Bill Irwin.
Yeah.
I just was like, you can't not look at him, because he just shows his emotions on his face the whole film. And I think the actors had so much freedom in that sense, as far as I could tell from watching it.
Certainly the sense that I've got researching and just basically re-immersing myself in it. I talked to Demme for the last Neil Young documentary he did, Trunk Show. So that would have been a couple of TIFFs later, 2010 or 2011. And we talked a little bit, because we didn't have a lot of time, but where do you even start with him? But we talked about his perspective on this was that he'd been remaking other people's work. He'd been making it his own, but he did, like Truth About Charlie is charade, and he did The Manchurian Candidate, which I was just arguing to somebody yesterday, or the day before, that is a really overlooked film.
Yeah.
Distinctly Demme, but also the material.
Yeah.
And he decided, I think his perspective, I think his decision in making this was that he just wanted to make a movie like he used to make one, without a net, with a bunch of people whose creativity inspires him and who he just wanted to place in a room together. And when he does that, the 7 or 8 movies he's made, when he's simply concentrating on character, and I'd even include The Silence of the Lambs in that, it just becomes so pleasurable.
Yeah, there's a magic to it. Yeah. And you can tell that he like, as the wedding guests and the people that are doing the music and everything, you can tell that he just called up all the people that he wanted to hang out with for a week and said, I'm doing a wedding movie, can you be guests at the wedding? And you can tell, because it's just, besides the like gut-wrenching emotionality of it and stuff, it's really like a joyful, amazing, like, I want to go to that wedding, I want to have that, I didn't want to get married and I want to have that wedding, But it's just the relationships between all the family members are so true. Like, I just found them so truthful, so real. Like the sisters, how you can hate someone so much at one moment, but you can't help but love them the next. And it's like, a lot of films don't really, I don't find, it's too on the nose. It's like, okay, this is how these people feel about each other, and there's no gray area. And it's like, this movie was like all gray area.
Yeah. And I think, again, like, you have an actor and the child of a filmmaker, Jenny Lumet, writing this from a perspective of wanting to avoid all of those cliches. I mean, I can't count, I don't even want to think about the number of times I've heard people in movies say, I'm your brother, I'm your sister. I've known you, we've known each other our whole lives. Why are we fighting? Yeah. Or my favorite new one, which is in every episode of everything on television and in most movies, is you said so yourself, when you need to repeat something back to someone.
Totally.
People don't say that. No. They don't say it in that sort of fashion, and they don't. It's narrative insistence, it's exposition, it's someone saying, we need to make this clear. Yeah,
it's treating your audience like they're stupid, essentially. Like, you need to have all this information so you can make an informed decision about, no, throw that out the window, which is why this is like, he did. He was like, you guess.
Yeah, we don't need to know exactly how everyone else is connected. The idea is, if you're and of course, part of the fun is discovering that people do have connections that we don't understand and aren't aware of. And for me, the last time I watched it, which was a couple of years ago, was watching the way that Kim, that Hathaway's character, prods those relationships between people that she's not involved in,
Yeah.
where she insinuates herself into conversations or tries to get away from people and bumps into other people.
Yeah.
She's like a toxic pinball
Yeah.
in this
Totally.
space.
Totally. And the first time I watched it, I was like, I hate her. I'm so mad at her. Right?
Which you're supposed to,
For
I
so
think,
much of the
yeah.
film. But then, I mean, I've seen it like 8 times now because it's just my go-to whenever I'm like, when do I want to... Rachel getting married. And I have to watch it alone now because I refuse to watch it with anyone else.
Oh, okay.
For whatever reason, this is like my solo time movie.
Okay.
Because I feel like, you know, I can sense the like discomfort in someone when they're sitting beside me with the, you know, how long the speeches go, or the just the length of like the wedding scene itself, and I can sense the like shifting of. I'm like, no, go. Let me watch this by myself. Then go away. You don't get it. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I kind of delight in watching movies I know really well with people who've never seen them before.
Yeah.
Because it's so much more interesting to me to
I
watch how a
usually
movie
do
works a
too.
person.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can sort of see that. And this one, I have to say, it's always shorter than I remember. I remember it as being like 125 or 135 minutes, and it's under 2.
Yeah.
And every time I put it in and think, oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
And nothing's missing. Like,
Nope.
that's the movie.
Nope.
But it
Totally.
just breathes in a way that most films don't.
Yeah.
And Demme, again, like this guy who's been making movies for, I guess by that point it would have been 35 years, just has the confidence to make his movie.
Yeah. And I also thought, when I first watched it, I was like, there must be a lot of... I just assumed there was a lot of improv, and there was a lot of... And then I watched an interview with him and Jenny Lumet, and she was like, no, it was pretty much the script.
Yeah.
That was what I wrote. You know, with the... There was a couple of the speeches, I think, that were improv, and a couple times that he let the actors kind of just go when he could tell that it wasn't flowing. But for the most part, it was all scripted. And that's, for me, because I've done a couple improv movies, and trying to find that rhythm, that cadences in your voice, and the, you know, when it's strictly scripted, it's so difficult. And so that's when I was like, wow, those actors really like took those words, and he gave them the freedom to, like, he, you know, a lot of the stuff is kind of one take with the camera finding little moments, and he, you know, he'd do one take and say, well, that was, what do we need? I don't know if we really need anything else there.
Yeah,
You
it's
know?
it's kind of a counterpoint to the way Robert Altman used to work, which was that he wouldn't tell the actors where they were in a shot. And
Right.
everybody had to be on all the time. And he mic'd everybody individually. That was this whole big innovation that he came up with in the 70s, the individual mics from MASH. And so people were just always going. But you get this background buzz of noise in his films that isn't happening here. Because, yeah, I think this one... the pinball analogy, right? Like, it's all moving parts, but everything has to be accounted for all the time. Everybody needs to know what's going on. You can't... I guess if you improvise with a movie like this, you risk revealing something you shouldn't reveal.
Yeah.
Or telegraphing, or even having an actor just come up with something.
That's
well,
true.
that time I lost my thumb. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, well, now we have to work that in.
That's so true, because it was so tightly, the story was so tightly wound. That, yeah, you're right.
To the point that we don't really know... I mean, we know a lot of things by the end of the film. We know everybody pretty well, but we don't really know why Deborah Winger's character is the way she is. I mean, you can guess and you can make decisions about her while you're watching it, but it withholds. Like, the movie is actively refusing to tell you why some people are the way they are.
Yeah.
We know why Kim is,
Yeah.
but we don't know why her mother is.
Yeah.
And that's, like, that makes me watch her even more closely,
Oh,
and the
and
two of them together especially.
Deborah Winger in that movie is just like, she walks on screen and you're like, that is every person that I know that's ever been somewhere that they really don't want to be, and is just like carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders, but is just trying to get through it.
Yeah.
And her like, every time she's on screen, you're just like, oh god, that poor woman.
Yeah. No, it's like the color temperature of the film drops by 5 degrees when she shows up.
Totally.
And it's not like, and it doesn't. It's just an effect of her performance.
Yeah.
There are ways that you could, you know, a less confident filmmaker or a less skilled filmmaker would have found other ways to make sure we get it. But it's just like, no, let's just hold on her face for 2 seconds longer than we need to, and it all comes through.
Until the smile disappears when everyone else turns away, and the smile disappears, or the, you know, the facade goes down. Yeah. Another thing that I loved about it was how the music was always in the film. Like, it was, you know, you'd turn a corner and there was the band, and I remember reading that he had kind of said, instead of scoring the film after it's done, let's score it while we make it.
Yeah.
And well, I mean, he does so much stuff with music too, right?
Oh,
Jonathan
yeah,
Demme. So
legendary
that's
for
not, so that's not surprising. But so let's see how the music changes the performances of the actors. Let's let that dictate the performances rather than letting the performance dictate the score afterwards. Let's do it all at the same time. And I was like, that's so interesting because music is, it changes a room. It's yeah.
Yeah, I think that must be what he meant by talking about working without a net, because you can't take that back. Like, you can't suddenly change the score or replace the fingering won't match, or the voices or the shifting of the bodies won't make sense. And at the same time, you're basically guaranteeing that all your dialogue can't be ADR. Like,
totally.
You're locking the world
You're
in.
screwed.
And you can always tell in the big budget stuff where people are miming to nothing and that the rhythms aren't quite right.
Yeah.
But with this, it's like there's no question. Even the end credit scene is all about people just farting around on instruments, and it shows us who they are.
Yeah.
And how it works.
Yeah, and there's a scene where Anne Hathaway's Kim says it's an emotional scene, and she turns to the band and like, are they going to play all night?
Yeah.
And someone tells them to kind of give it a rest and stuff, and that was because Anne Hathaway was like, I can't focus with the music going on, and Jonathan Demme was like, well, then tell them to stop.
Yeah. God damn it.
I know.
He's so good at this stuff. I mean,
I know.
I think about Something Wild is the one I always fall back on. That was the first movie of his that I understood who Jonathan Demme is.
Yeah.
Because it's so joyful and bouncy, and people are getting punched in the face and murdered, and it's still happy.
Yeah.
Like, you go in and out on Wild Thing and David Byrne, and it's just too pleasurable to really be unsettling. And then everyone said, oh, there's this moment where the lights go down and the movie's suddenly darker. It's like, yeah, he literally told us this is where it gets darker, and we still were like, okay, what do you got? I'm still happy. Show me more.
I know.
And then he's one of those filmmakers who I think he legitimately got seduced by Hollywood, by the idea, because he could go off and make his documentaries and music stuff, but he always came back to do big films that aren't as satisfying as his little films. And it took him like a good maybe 10 years in the desert to come back and make Rachel and figure out what he's not what he's best at, but what he most loves.
Yeah.
Because he's good at everything.
Yeah, and I mean, you can tell, like, with this movie, you're like, this is a labor of love. There's no question about the fact that whoever made this film loved making it. You can just tell by the camera movements and by the poetry of all of the movement and everything that he just... I would imagine, I wish this was video right now so you could see my face, but I would imagine he was sitting behind the camera just like... like a little kid, right? Yeah. Because the movie feels like a little kid is making it. Like, okay, let's point the camera. Okay, now go. He's telling Declan Quinn, or I think it was the DOP, like, wait, okay, point it here. Okay. Oh no, go get that little moment there. Now come back here. You can, would imagine the excitement was like palpable in the.
Yeah, he is so good at matching the energies together, like collaborative energy of whatever's happening, that we haven't even mentioned Rosemary DeWitt by name yet, and
she's my favorite in the whole film.
She's phenomenal. I mean, the idea too that somehow, despite the fact that it's focused, I mean, I'm looking at the picture on the cover of the Blu-ray, and you cannot make out her face.
No.
She's deliberately obscured. She and Bill Ruin are both obscured, clouded. Because that's the message they want to send, which is absolutely brilliant, because that is the movie. But that Rachel does become the central character, because how can she not? Because it's her wedding day, but also because she actually deserves it. Like, the more time we spend in the world, the more our sympathies always stay with Kim, I think, because Hathaway's so good at showing us how hurt she is.
Yeah.
But you kind of start to relate to Kim the way you would at that wedding, which is like, could you just let your sister be happy?
Give it a rest.
Let it happen. Yeah.
And Rosemary DeWitt is the more interesting character of the two.
Oh yeah. I
would think for that exact reason, because you're like, what? She's dealing with so much, and she's making concessions at the beginning, and then she's like, no, what are you doing?
Yeah. Baggage and happiness is a way more interesting thing, I think, for an actor to play than baggage and baggage.
Oh yeah, totally.
Not that Hathaway doesn't do a great job, because she does, and I kind of want to get into the backlash thing that keeps happening to Anne Hathaway, which I don't fully understand. Well, that every time she does something really great, there is this weird wave of kind of fan hatred. I don't understand what it is. I mean, I get that you can argue against Les Mis winning her the Oscar, even though when I saw that performance, that single take performance of that song, it's just like, oh yeah, she's going to win that because she's great, and it's a great performance. The movie I found almost unwatchable.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not faulting her, and I'm not faulting Jackman. Those two gave terrific performances,
Yeah.
and I'm fine with her winning the Oscar for it. It's like the reverse Leo DiCaprio.
Yeah.
DiCaprio makes movie after movie that clearly is pointed towards showing you how great Leonardo DiCaprio is as an actor, as a character. Even when he's playing a bad guy, he's a bad guy with a heart. And you as an actor, I'm sure he chooses the roles that frame him this way because subconsciously or consciously, that's what he wants to do.
Yeah.
And Hathaway has taken a really interesting range of work, stuff like Love and Other Drugs, stuff like this, even Passengers, which is not a good movie, but she's really good in it.
Yeah.
And people kind of shit on her for it all the time.
For some reason, she's really easy to shit on.
Yeah,
I don't know what it is either.
I don't get that. Maybe it's just because she was instantly naturally charismatic in The Princess Diaries, and people kind of hold it against the pretty girl
The
from
Disney
high school
princess?
or something.
I
Yeah.
don't know. But it's funny because when I first watched this, I was like, she wasn't my favorite part of the movie. You know, and I did the same thing. I kind of dismissed her from the whole package and thought about what else I loved rather than focusing on her performance. And then, as I've gone back and watched it time and time again, I'm like, no, she's fucking great.
Yeah.
She's great in this film. She's really, really great. But I did the same thing at the beginning because everyone else around her was also so strong. And I think, I don't know, maybe we're just used to seeing her kind of like helm the movie and with this one I was like, no, I'm gonna focus on other people instead of her.
Well, her neediness in the film, like Kim's neediness, is off-putting.
Yeah.
Because and maybe that's it. Maybe that psychologically just didn't read with people, or did read with people and thought, oh, Anne Hathaway wants me to look at her. It's like, no, Kim wants you to look at her. Anne Hathaway is playing that really, really well.
Yeah.
Because it's not a performance that's showy.
No.
I mean, I think about, just in terms of comparing needy wedding characters. I mean, there's Bombax and Margot at the Wedding, where Nicole Kidman plays the opposite of Kim, who is the quiet shark destroying her sister's happiness. But she's also so committed to the role that I never for a second think, oh, Nicole Kidman is showing off with her acting. No, she's terrifying. Like, she's playing someone who's a monster. And Kim is the same. Like, Kim is someone who is out of control, but it's performed in such a way that I don't see Anne Hathaway saying, look how great I am at playing this. I just see a performance. I see a character. I mean, there are lots of actors that I look at and occasionally will see a character.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll see Jared Leto showing me how Jared Leto-y he is today.
Yeah. Or like, look how good I can act. Right?
Yeah. Look how hard I'm trying.
Let me show you how hard I'm acting.
Bison liver.
Yeah.
And
oh, God.
Nothing against DiCaprio.
Don't get me started.
Maybe a little against DiCaprio.
I think I can tell already we have the same opinion on this.
Well, this episode is actually going to follow the Revenant episode.
Oh, is it?
Awkward. But,
super awkward.
I understand why... I understand why DiCaprio fully commits. I understand why he's doing what he's doing. The movie will not let me forget how hard it is for him to be doing this, and how hard it was for Inarritu to make the film, which is horseshit. Yeah. Because, you still have a crew, and you still have catering, and, you could get artisanal bison liver, whatever. Yeah. But a movie like this...
Here's your organic bison liver, Mr. DiCaprio.
The finest, and then you just... nobody in 2008, when this came out, nobody was running around telling people how Anne Hathaway ruined herself. She just did it. And she was unwilling, I think, or she generally is unwilling. I mean, when she played Fantine in Les Mis, there was a big deal about how she cut her hair and how they filmed that, which is directorial sadism, not the actor. Like, obviously she agreed contractually this is going to happen at this time, at this date. And it's fine. It works for the character, certainly, and it's what happens. Mm-hmm. But you can also fake that stuff. You don't have to go through with it.
No, and then it takes the focus away from the film, and that becomes why people go see the film, or that becomes what they're the talking point around the performance or whatever it is, and that it kind of discredits the whole performance, right?
Yeah, or it cheapens the product anyway. Certainly the end product. No one was walking around saying, "Well, Anne Hathaway did coke," just to find out what it felt like.
Totally.
The way, Leo couldn't get Quaaludes, but he was trying some other stuff. Just act. Yeah. Just do it. Yeah. Just go out and be this person. That's your job, and ideally why you're there is because you want to disappear. Yeah. You want to play this character. I mean, you are an actual actress, and I'm monologuing you about this. but yeah, I mean, do you ever feel that it's necessary to either debase or destroy yourself in order to understand that?
It's like the argument that happens over and over with actors, right? It's like, well, if you want to know how it feels to be on this drug, then you have to do that drug. If you want to know how it feels to be homeless, then you have to be homeless. If you want to know how it feels to be, want to kill yourself, then you have to, put yourself through depression and it's
Find your darkness.
Find your darkness and, tap into, be miserable. You gotta be miserable for 6 months if you're gonna pull this off. I don't think so. I mean, I do understand that everyone's different and everyone's process is very different. I personally don't feel that I need to, cut myself off from my family, my friends, and hide myself in a dark basement for 6 months to then play somebody who, is
right.
depressed or is antisocial or, I think that the beauty of being an actor is that we have those emotions that we can tap into without needing to go to those places where we're like, it's like this, they say the same with writers, you have to be tortured to be, or a poet, or you have to be,
Yeah.
Do you?
Just drunk.
I don't know. Like, you can't be in a happy relationship if you're going to be a true artist.
Right.
Like, God forbid you be in, like, a happy marriage or have, like, a, have balance in your life if you're going to be a true artist. Like, forget it.
And you look at, I always offer up David Lynch's this argument because he got into therapy and his movies got less interesting.
Right.
Like, they just stopped being as vital.
Yeah.
And his formal tricks are still cool and I enjoy what he does, but I don't love it as much as I used to.
So there's an argument for the other side.
Yeah. I get that you need your demons.
Yeah.
Or that you need to understand who you are and what your process is. I totally understand that. But yeah, the idea of just destroying yourself for a role or a concept the method is great because the concept of pulling emotions out of yourself and relating to your character is great. But and again, I just did this in the Revenant episode, but there's that story about Hoffman showing up on Marathon Man and Olivia saying, you stayed up for 2 days, just try acting. It's so much easier. It's so much easier on everyone.
Totally.
But that's what this is, because I don't think Demme would stand for anybody showing up in a bad shape.
No, I don't think so.
He wants people to be happy.
Yeah.
On his shoots.
Yeah.
I don't think that it would really surprise me, I'll put it that way, if anybody on this set had been doing anything other than just, having coffee in the morning and coming in and just doing the job.
Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree.
And he's assembled a cast that is so full of life, even in the darkest moments. Like Bill Irwin, who, again, if you want someone to convey all this awful emotion on his face, you cast a mime. It's brilliant. Like, he just radiates it physically.
Yeah.
And even I was stunned to see Sebastian Stan at the beginning of the movie as the most obnoxious of the rehab characters. That's Bucky from the Captain America movies now. Like,
I wouldn't even put that together.
I almost didn't recognize him. His hair is different and his face is a little puffier.
Yeah.
But it's like he's about to be in the Civil War movie that's coming out in a couple of weeks, and holy shit, he's in Rachel Getting Married.
Yeah.
And if that gets people to see this movie,
good for them. Lucky them.
There's a gallery that BuzzFeed hasn't done yet.
Totally.
Your favorite Marvel heroes before
and after. Yeah. I mean, the casting for me was just so great, and I think he had got the casting director to he just said, bring me like 5 of your favorite people ever for each of these roles. I don't care where they come from. I don't have to have seen them before. Like, Rosemary DeWitt, I don't think had done much film before that. She'd done a lot of theater.
But I don't think anyone had seen it yet.
No, and she'd done a ton and she was a theater actress. And same with, a lot of these actors, they were like, we just want people. He was like, I want people that I'm going to like. So get me your best. It doesn't matter what they've done or who they are, or just bring them to me.
Yeah. It's an incredible cast, too, of people who just look like humans. There are no actorly... Nobody's starved. Kim looks like crap, but she's supposed to. Nobody's been jogging that day. No. Everybody looks healthy, but human.
Yeah, and just like the most beautiful faces. You can gather a room of the most beautiful faces, and not traditionally beautiful, like you're saying, just like people that you can't take your eyes off of because they're so interesting, and their eyes, you're like, oh, this is, like I said, I want to be in this. I want to be at that house. Even with the horrible past and the sadness and everyone's demons, like I still want to be there. I'd still totally be there eating a sandwich that Bill Irwin made for me.
Yeah, it does look like ultimately, other than that one bad moment, it looks like a pretty good wedding.
Yeah,
like it looks like a pretty fun day.
Oh yeah, totally.
And compared to things like Altman's A Wedding or Margot at the Wedding, or I know I'm missing one really big one, huge wedding movie. This feels like we could be done with them. Like, this feels like the one that just gets it over with.
Yeah.
This is the movie that, when you think about a wedding movie, this is the one that hopefully people will think of. Unless, someone can always reinvent it and come up with something else. But it does feel like there doesn't need to be another one of these.
No, and there has been so many. It's such a tried story now. You know, it's like I mean, my film was was about someone's sister getting married, and there was a big wedding scene, and you know, there's the black sheep and the and even now I'm like 5 years later, I'm like, yeah, that's done. I'm not doing that.
A little tropey.
Yeah. But this one came along and it kind of gave you hope. Like, oh, okay, you can still find new ways to tell old stories. Cool,
yeah.
Great.
It doesn't feel like the work of a guy in his. He must have been in his 60s by then. Mm-hmm. No, that can't be right. Late 50s. But it doesn't feel like the work of an older filmmaker.
No.
It doesn't feel like Jonathan Demme, Oscar-winning Hollywood legend who everyone loves and just can do anything at any time. It feels like a younger, angrier, stranger energy is at work.
Yeah.
But it's not... No, angry is the wrong word, because it's not an angry movie. It's a movie about... Ultimately, it's a movie about compassion. But it's about so many swirling family tensions that, you know, you get flashes of anger, but they're all kind of deserved. Like, everybody is right to be angry.
Yeah.
You can't just wash it away. Like, the movie is about learning to live with the stuff that you've done, as opposed to being forgiven, which I think is really rare in cinema.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly American cinema. We like bows on things.
I was just going to say it.
Tied up.
I was just going to say, because it doesn't wrap it and put a pretty bow on it. I was just going to say that. That's exactly what. And the funniest thing about that is that whenever I watch this movie, I can never remember the ending. I've literally seen it like 8 times, I think.
Yeah.
And every time I watch it, I'm like, oh yeah, how does this end again? I can't even remember. Like, where does it stop? Until I get to the end, and I'm like, oh yeah, it just kind of stops.
Yeah.
Right. That's why I can never remember how it ends.
Yeah,
never.
It trails off, but it trails off in a really satisfying way.
Yeah.
Like, you don't feel abandoned.
No.
I just this morning saw Whit Stillman's new film, Love and Friendship, and it just stops. And it's where the story ends, and it's fine, but it ends almost abruptly. And I realized, it's like, oh, I've been enjoying these people. I don't want to leave just yet. I've been in this world, and it's one that I never get to see. It's a Jane Austen adaptation. Everybody's in this ridiculous fancy clothes, and you get to watch them be snippy with each other and sly and funny. And when it's over, it's just like, aw, it's 92 minutes. That's not fair.
Right.
And this one, even though I remember it as being longer than it is, when it ends, it's just like, yeah, it's time to leave. That's how weddings go.
Yeah.
You just drift off.
Yeah.
And you don't know when people will see each other again. And I think that's part of this, is that the sisters may go a long time without speaking. We might not see Rachel and Kim together. You know, I sort of imagine where they're going, because that's how close I feel to them by the end of the film. I'm already invested, but
absolutely,
it's kind of okay if they take a break from each other.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, the best part of the film too is like just how everything's so seamlessly woven together. Like the fact that it's like this big, beautiful interracial wedding, you know, and with all the like colors and it's just like, it's not even mentioned. It's not even a thing. It's not about that. It's just about people.
I was trying to figure out how to introduce that in the conversation. It's just like, do we even bother pointing out?
But that's what I mean. You don't even bother
between the two interracial couples that are being formed in the course of the movie, and how the first one, the established couple. I mean, it's not a spoiler or anything. Presumably people have seen this, but the Rachel and Kim's dad has remarried to an African American woman, and it's never commented upon. It's not an issue. But it also kind of echoes really beautifully in the sense that that marriage was something that he desperately needed. Yeah. And so Rachel might be chasing the same thing in the relationship that she's started. Yeah. But it's just there. Yeah. It's never commented upon. And it, you know, a lesser film, again, Kim would have said that. She would have blurted it out during her speech and ruined that even further. Exactly. But this way, it's just floating. It's just, and there's other things, too, that I find that are kind of not dwelled upon throughout the film. You know, when she sleeps with the best man. Yeah. And then for the entire length of the rest of the film until the very end, they have a moment before she goes, but it's not even mentioned again. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, it's not... That's the thing, is that at no time are we being, like, bashed over the head with, like, this is how you're supposed to feel. This is the storyline. Did you see that? Did you see that? You know? There's no pointedness. There's no telling us where we need to... It's like we find our moments in it when we want to and how we want to. And also, as soon as you say that, I remembered that, of course, that was one of the things that I really appreciated, was that they immediately see each other again. It doesn't take till the third act. No. They are instantly in the same space again. Mm-hmm. And and because of the whole AA thing, we understand as the audience why they're obliged to keep quiet about it.
Yeah.
But it's not like it vacillates while you watch them interact just by the way they stand together between, is it like shame and respect?
Yeah.
That there's no answer. It's just however they're feeling in the moment.
Yeah.
And because of the AA thing, we understand maybe a little better why they would find solace in each other and why they wouldn't talk about it and where it goes. And just, again, Kim has to move out of focus in order to do whatever it is she's going to do next at the end of the film.
And I would imagine, as a screenwriter, for Jenny Lumet, if she had, submitted it for notes, or if she had cared what anyone else thought about her script, the first thing people probably would have said, the Hollywood people would have torn it apart and said, okay, well, this storyline doesn't go anywhere. How come they don't, make out again in the middle of the film? Or why is there no conflict there between the two people that have had sex?
Yeah.
First of all, we need that. We need the father and the mother to have more of a, why are they seem to be on good terms. That's not, let's have more,
The more conflict. You said it yourself. There was, we was just a fling.
Yeah. Yeah. Why isn't there more conflict here? Why isn't there, why aren't you kind of reiterating this point? And that's the beauty of the writing too. I'd love to read the script. I've never got my hands on the actual screenplay, but I'd love to read it to see how it translates into the film, because like they said, it was pretty true to script, which is just lends to, like, it's beautiful. It's beautiful that those are not things that need to be worked into it.
Yeah, it's all just there.
Yep.
Like, it's there in the actor's backstory.
Yeah.
They're breathing it, they're living it. It's like an immersion in this world that we we're in it, and then we get left behind. Like, we aren't even pushed out. The movie leaves us. Like, it goes away at the end.
And we don't get the answers that we want at any point during the movie, which I love, because it's like, okay, but what about, nope, forget it. We've moved on from there, haven't you?
Yeah, it's what's the term? It's like watching, it's a terrarium.
Yeah.
It's like watching these things happen, or sea monkeys or something.
Yeah.
And figuring out what they're going to do next. We've sort of touched on it already, but what have you borrowed or stolen or lifted? Has there been anything from this film's DNA that you've incorporated into your own?
Yeah. Big time, yes. I was working on my film that I did a few years ago when I saw this. I think I was in the really early sort of like scripting in my head stages. But it was a wedding film, funnily enough, and it was about two sisters, very different, but still, that old thing. And I had people tell me, like, you can't, it's been done, you can't do it. And I was like, oh, it's fine, I'm gonna do it anyway. And then I saw this and I was like, oh no. And then I just said, you know what, it doesn't matter, it's my first film, it's it's an experiment for me anyway. I'm just gonna make it the way I want to make it. And I had a big wedding scene in it, and so I would go back and watch this and be like, how do I, without blatantly ripping off this film, how do I take the things that I find so magical and, incorporate them into... This was a big inspiration for me. Yeah.
Well, it's good that it can do that. That, you don't come away from it thinking, I want to do that thing, that one thing that I saw in this movie, and just, I can imagine people actors specifically coming out of this and saying, oh, I want to do exactly what Anne Hathaway does as Kim. I want to do that performance. Like, no, you want to be inspired by it. You want to take it and do something new. And I think Demme would be, I know Demme would be happy that he's inspiring people, because that was his whole thing. He was, mentoring people left and right in the 70s and 80s, and just finding new ways to work with people and nudging them into
I would imagine as an actor, it must be just like such a gift to work with him, because you can just tell that he's not breathing over your neck, telling you how to play your character, or telling you how to read your lines, and he just kind of gives everyone, he like steps out of it, and especially in this film, just gives everyone, like, go do your thing.
Yeah, I don't think you could get this movie out of people who don't trust you.
No,
who don't know that you trust them.
No, absolutely, yeah, and that's what I meant when I say it's a film that makes me want to make films, because as an actor, especially in Canada, there's a lot of doozies. You have to sift through a lot of shit sometimes. And you do some things that don't necessarily creatively feed you, which is why it's so important to keep going back to the things that you watch that have inspired you in the beginning.
Sure,
because then I'm like, okay, this is why I wanted to do this. This is the kind of movies I want to make. These are the kind of scripts I want to write. This is, Yeah.
Well, there's so much opportunity now, because the cost of production has gotten so reasonable, and distribution is, tomorrow is National Canadian Film Day.
Yeah.
I was just writing about the fact that 2 weeks ago, there were 4 Canadian filmmakers who had movies open on the same day on April 8th. And 3 of them were actual Canadian productions. It was Borealis and Across the Line and Sleeping Giant.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jean-Marc Vallée released Demolition the same day. They all came out, and they were all good. And it was one of those things where, you can actually say, without forcing yourself, that these are worthy. Like, there's this interesting new wave of Canadian cinema happening, and
thank God.
But it is.
Thank God.
I'm so happy to be in this moment, to be able to do this, because Andrew Cividino with Sleeping Giant, we talked about it in his episode almost like last September. We recorded it, and it was bizarre to realize that there is a new wave happening and that you're in the middle of it, rather than turning around and going, oh, well, this is, like in the late 80s when suddenly our lighting packages got sophisticated enough that directors could do stuff with them. And you got Razuma and Egoyan and Cronenberg and Arcand all doing deliberate visual signatures as well as telling good stories. So it suddenly looked like art as opposed to that weird telefilm thing that was going on with the film stock.
Totally.
And now with digital, we've reached the point where you can make a movie almost about anything. And it'll work. And you have to figure out how. But it's possible to make good work again. And there was a lull. I mean, we went without for a while.
Yeah, I think there was too. I think there was too. I think there's like a collective kind of exhale right now. Everyone's still really cautious to say, I feel like, but I feel like there has been like a collective, like, okay, maybe we're getting good again. Maybe we can make things that,
Well, there's a sense of potentiality in Canadian, in English Canadian cinema. I think that's the important distinction.
That's a good distinction to make for sure.
Because, I mean, you've got Quebec cinema has always been ahead of English Canada in terms of distribution and profitability and marketability. But we've also just seen, Villeneuve and Vallée and Falardeau just go out and make movies in the world. And we're not quite seeing the same thing happen with English Canadian filmmakers at the same speed. But we will, I think. I mean, stuff like Diamond Tongues last year or Sleeping Giant point towards the possibility of making really distinctive, really interesting films for no money by people who are committed and actors who respond, and this weird fusion, like people casting musicians and people casting unknown kids, and it's just like a huge net has been thrown out there, and it's catching stuff.
I think people aren't scared anymore to try. At least if it doesn't work, okay, but at least people are kind of pulling out their socks and being like, well, we should just try. Maybe let's just give it a try again. Let's not be scared.
So what's the direction you're pointed in? Like, what do you want to...
I've been, like, before the last couple years, I guess, I was doing a lot more behind the scenes. I was doing a lot of producing, and I was working with Terry Miles, who's a Canadian filmmaker.
Okay.
We worked together for years, and so I've kind of pulled myself away from the behind the scenes in the past couple years. I've refocused more on my acting. And I've been doing a lot of photography, so that's kind of the two that have taken front seat now.
Did anything motivate the change, or was it just a...
No, I think I just tired myself out.
Okay.
I tired myself out with producing independent film.
I certainly understand.
I ran out of favors. I couldn't ask anyone for another favor. It was like, oh gosh, I think it's time to take a break.
Production is, it's gotta be worse than, I mean, everybody says with directing you commit 2 years of your life to one project, but with producing you've got to have at least 3 balls in the air, right? And you're always working. And really for me it was just, it was creatively fulfilling for a little while, and then when it stopped being creatively fulfilling, I was like, okay, it's time to take a break. And I think that I'm... Unless it was my own project, I'm still open to obviously getting back in the producer chair. But for now, I'm just gonna gracefully bow out. And so I've been refocusing on the acting, and then photography has been something that's come up in the past, I guess, 2 years or so. That was a hobby, but it's actually turned into more of a full-time job now. So that's been great. That's cool.
Yeah.
And wedding photos? Are you doing?
I do some.
Just to bring it right back around.
Yeah, totally.
Have you witnessed the kind of, I mean, what happens if you're on site and something bad happens? Like, what's your responsibilities? Because this fascinates me. I've never been able to talk to anyone about this.
It's pretty crazy. Like, I've noticed now that because you're there the whole day, and you try and kind of blend into the drapes if you can, but the bride is like looking to you all the time to make sure. And if there's meltdown, like, guess who's the first person? Not the maid of honor, it's a lot of the time it's me trying to talk them off the ledge, because I'm in such an intimate space with them.
Sure. And
I'm like, don't worry about the flowers. Don't worry about... There's people to do that, It's like weddings are a beast.
Oh, yeah. No, again, this movie is the one of the reminders of the worst case scenario
Yeah.
you try to avoid, but
Yeah.
it also is absolutely believable.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's happened to people.
Totally. You know, I mean, this is on like a grand scale. It's like, this is an amazing wedding, but at the core of it, it's still a beast. And it's still, you know, people lose their minds. Families break up. People go crazy.
Oh, it's horrible.
It's like for one day. Why?
Yeah. Kate and I got married at City Hall, 27 people. It was good.
See, brilliant.
Simple, small.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
The more weddings that I photograph, the more I that's the direction I'm going. It's like, let's elope.
I don't see why not. My thanks to Kristine Cofsky, whose new movie No Men Beyond This Point opens at the TIFF Bell Lightbox tomorrow, Saturday, April 23rd. It also drops on iTunes this coming Tuesday, April 26th. So, you know, if you're not in town, you can find it there. Thanks also to Pam Stillman. She knows what she did. You can find Kristine on Twitter at Kristine Ilana, KRISTINEILANA, all one word. And you can find Rachel Getting Married on Blu-ray and DVD from Sony Pictures Home Entertainment. It's also available on iTunes and Google Play. And if you're in Canada, you can stream it on Netflix right now. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner and elsewhere on the internet at nowtoronto.com. You can also find this podcast on Twitter at Semcast, SEMcast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. And if you want to leave a review on iTunes, for this episode, let's try to work in the phrase tension party. Thanks for listening.